So within the context of the elder group, they're going to be men with a variety of different personalities. Some are going to be that strong, put it out there, fully engage in conversations. But there's also going to be some very wise men who are more reserved, not as easy to engage in conversation. So when you have that diversity, men obviously who are all qualified, and yet just different personality makeups. How do you benefit from all of those men and keep that in a reasonable balance?
I think there are two sides to that. I think on the one hand, I think there are some men who are quiet and reserved who should speak up in the meeting, who don't speak up in the meeting, but they're tempted to leave the meeting upset about what was decided and to talk about that when they shouldn't, when they had a chance to say their piece in the meeting itself and explain their wisdom there. So I think that's one side of it. I don't think that happens too often. You get the right people, you're not going to have so much of that, but I think that does have to be addressed. That's wrong. It's wrong for a man to be in an elder meeting, have a strong opinion, not say anything in the context where he should be saying it, and then leave disgruntled with the decision and potentially even sow division in the context of the church. Again, that hasn't been an issue as far as I know here at Countryside, but I know it's an issue. I've heard of it in other places. But I think the more common problem is you have a guy who is a man who is wise, who has a lot of insight, but he's just by nature more reserved. And you have other men who are leaders of a different kind. They're kind of that A-type personality. They're driven, outspoken. They don't really hold anything back. And so I think if you're not careful, the more outspoken ones can dominate the discussion, and you can lose some of the potential input that really could help in the discussion. So, and I know you've done the same thing. This is my own approach is if it's a discussion particularly that's in any way controversial, in any way, not contentious, that's not the right word, but you know what I mean. It's debated. There's a lot of disagreement about this among the elders. I want to hear from every elder. And so I want to do two things. One is I don't want to make my voice so loud that I basically silence other voices. I think if you're the main teaching pastor, you have to be so careful not to override the other men in the room, because you're the primary pastor teacher. You're the one that people respond to. Many, perhaps men on the elder board, if you've been there any time at all, many of the men on the elder board, they came to that church because of you and your ministry. And if you're not careful, you can unintentionally just push your own views and silence theirs. So I think it's really important for the main teaching pastor to make it clear that he wants to know what the other elders think and wants to include that in the discussion. And for me, that means very practically, if there's a controversial, debated issue, is I want to stop and say, look, we've heard from several of us who've spoken on this. I'd love to know what each of you men are thinking about this issue. And I'll just stop and we'll just go around the table and just one by one say, what do you think about this? This has been the discussion. Here's what's been thrown out on both sides of the issue. But where are you at this point? And it's amazing what some of those quieter, more reserved voices can contribute to that discussion. And in the end, their voice may have the greatest impact because something they say really drives the discussion in a different direction. Other times, it merely confirms. As you go around the room and each person has a chance to speak to the issue, it only confirms the sort of consensus that's already been arrived by the louder voices.
Yeah, and I think your leadership draws out the wisdom of your elders, but it's because you're not driving an agenda. And I worked with you for a long, long time, but I've also worked for a number of other pastors, and the board was there for their benefit, not them being there for the benefit of the church. And those are two very different scenarios. And the fact that you want to hear from those men, I think at the end of the day, makes the biggest difference, right? Because if ultimately as a pastor, you're there to drive your agenda, to accomplish your purposes, and those elders are there to accommodate that, that doesn't foster men sharing. And I think that's important for churches to hear, because I think it's misunderstood in a huge way in churches. And you have a strong personality pastor who's there, he's got his agenda. And so I respect you and I appreciate that perspective. And you told me that when you came here, and I was already on staff, and you said, Rock, I want you to participate. I'm not asking you to agree with me. I'm asking you to share what you believe God would have you to share. And that was very unique for me. And I think that's what encourages men to participate, is that you value their input. And I think that's so extremely important in the life of the church, because I think we've lost that perspective to a great degree in many churches. And I think it's been devastating in a lot of ways.
I know you know that I believe this. I mean, in the end, it really comes down to, do you believe in the wisdom of plurality or don't you?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're going to push your own agenda, you might as well say, this whole idea that God set up a plurality is a waste of time. It would be easier if I could just run this thing myself and do what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
You might as well say that, because
Right.
that's the reality. And so for me, I'm so grateful that all of that weight and responsibility doesn't fall on me, because I don't have enough wisdom to make every decision right.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't, and neither does any other individual. That's
Right.
the whole point of plurality,
Right.
is we need each other. We need those different perspectives and insights that help us arrive at a position that's the wisest moving forward.